from London, this is the Standard Podcast, and I'm Mark Blunden.
This Superloop will connect people from Croydon to Bromley, Harrow to Heathrow, Ilford to Royal Docks, from Harrow to North Woolwich and many more parts of London.
London's Superloop spans 85 miles of road, just 30 miles shy of the length of the M25. Now, a new section of the capital's orbital bus network is being proposed, but is it time to talk about New York-style express routes on the capital's rail and tube services? You join this episode of the Standard Podcast aboard a Route SL1 bus, which links Walthamstow Central and North Finchley. It comes as Labour Mayor Sadiq Khan says he will confirm the new Bakerloop service between Elephant Castle and Lewisham if he's re-elected. But his Tory rival for the City Hall job, Susan Hall, says Khan's wasting resources and the money would be spent more wisely on a Bakerloo line extension instead into Bromley. It comes a fortnight after the completion of London's bus express network, with the addition of routes SL2 linking Walthamstow and North Woolwich, SL3 linking Thamesmead and Bromley North, and SL5 linking Bromley North with Croydon town centre. Services run every 12 to 15 minutes. According to Transport for London, the Superloop now connects people using it with 310 other bus routes, 49 rail stations and 23 different rail lines. But the Superloop has been criticised for not reaching some parts of outer London, with the borough of Havering left entirely unserved by the network. And all this comes as commuters make their way back to work in London, with some rather unwelcome strike news on the train network. To find out more, we're joined by the Evening Standard's Transport and City Hall editor, Ross Lydall, who joins us on the SL1 route now. Ross, first of all, if you would, a Superloop explainer, how successful is the 85-mile network?
We are yet to find out in totality. What we do know is that of the 4 routes that existed before they were renamed and rebadged Superloop, they have gone up by more, and that's in terms of passenger numbers, than the wider London bus network. So in general, over the past couple of years, since the pandemic drew to a close, the number of passengers returning to the bus network in London and also to the London Underground has been increasing year on year. And what Transport for London says that on the new Superloop routes, these 4 rebadged ones, there has been about a 15 percentage point increase over and above the wider increase on all London buses. So the Superloop is doing better than the normal London bus routes, if you like, although we don't know exactly what's happened yet in terms of the brand new Superloop routes.
What was the idea behind the original Superloop plan?
The answer, if you like, was the Superloop. The question was, how on earth do I stop lots of people in outer London being really miffed off with the ULEZ expansion? That was the dilemma that Sadiq Khan had a year and a half ago, when he decided to expand the ULEZ to the Greater London boundary. What that caused was essentially a number of motorists in outer London felt that they could no longer afford to drive their car, or would have to trade in their car because they didn't want to pay the £12.50 a day ULEZ charge. However, they had the problem about how do they get around town, especially in areas where there is no tube network. Sadiq came up with the answer, the Superloop. How successful it's been, as we say, is an answer that we're still waiting to receive.
Tell us about the Bakerloop.
The Bakerloop is a rather splendidly named addition that has been proposed to the Superloop network by Sadiq Khan. He is doing this in the run-up to the mayoral elections, which happened on May the 2nd, and Sadiq is saying that if he gets re-elected in May, then he will look to expand the Superloop network along the route of the Bakerloo line extension, and rather than calling that the Superloop, he will call it the Bakerloop. Obviously a nice little play on words. What does that mean in reality? Well, it would run from Elephant Castle to Lewisham, which would be the first part of the Bakerloo extension, the tube line extension that of course has long been awaited and desired by many people in southeast London, but is a long way from ever being delivered.
And what's Susan Hall's argument that the money would have been better spent on the Bakerloo line extension?
Susan Hall, the Tory mayoral candidate, thinks that the Superloop is a super flop. She thinks this is just Sadiq messing around with another publicity stunt prior to the election and essentially wasting money. She has sort of mentioned, for example, the £6 million cost of setting up the Superloop network. She's also drawn attention to the renaming of the London Overground lines, which cost another £6 million. And she believes essentially that although that would be a small amount of money compared to the £10 billion needed to actually expand the Bakerloo line, that this is money wasted by Sadiq, yet more money that added together could be used for better policies and sort of for a better purpose.
Let's go to the ads. Stay there to find out more about the future of the Superloop and if it's had any tangible impact on keeping London moving. Why not hit follow in the meantime and give us a rating. Do we know whether it's having a tangible effect yet on traffic congestion?
The one thing we can certainly be sure of is that this has added to overall bus capacity. There are now many more buses on the road and there are more options for some Londoners to travel to certain areas. Overall, Transport for London says there's been about a 3% uplift in passenger numbers, which it is attributing to the Superloop, although the figures vary route by route. And as we sort of mentioned earlier, the newest of the routes, not the rebadged routes, but the sort of 5 brand new routes, will get figures for those in the autumn. So by and large you can see more buses on the road, but also that means of course more buses to delay the buses that already exist. You know, one of the most common sites around Walthamstow now, both in Forest Road and Hoe Street, which are two of the main feeder roads to Walthamstow Central Station, is the Superloop, either the SL1 or the SL2, and sadly on most occasions those buses are largely empty. So you can see plenty of the buses, they're very visible, but they don't seem to be carrying too many passengers. And actually, as I look just behind us now, there's 4 or 5 other passengers apart from you and I, Mark. So this is on the top deck. We could have 30 or 40 up here and it's not as busy as it might be.
What's your view on whether this express model of bus travel could work for other forms of transport as well?
Well, if you think of the express bus routes, whether they're going to or from Stansted Airport or Luton Airport, you know, coming out of the Victoria Coach Station, we have, for example, the Oxford Tube, which is a very high-profile, high-frequency bus straight to Oxford, between Oxford and Oxford Street, and it's also well used. The key thing here is the cost, because we also have the likes of Flixbus, which is often seen on telly on the Race Around the World, where you've got the various teams racing to the strangest places, and they always seem to manage to get on a Flixbus. Now, in the London context, I think it's a very good idea that you have express buses that run from large sort of population centres, all the suburban town centres, one to the other. The other good reason, of course, would be running to secondary schools. Quite often there are many pupils, especially secondary school age pupils, that travel out of borough to get to a good school, and if they've got a fast mode of transport, then it's much easier for them. The issue, of course, comes if you live halfway along the route and therefore cannot board the bus. So it's that trade-off between having a bus that pulls in frequently and can pick up more passengers, or one that goes quickly but can only really pick up passengers at one end or the other.
What do you think about on the tubes?
On the tubes, I think that would probably cause more problems than it solves. The idea of passengers not knowing exactly when to get off the tube or expecting the tube to stop at a certain station and suddenly it runs through would cause a lot of confusion. So I think it's an idea best kept to buses, not good for the tube. Possibly it's okay for the mainline railways. For example, on Thameslink, there's a good argument to have trains direct from, say, Luton Airport to St Pancras or from St Albans to St Pancras without stopping, so you get fast trains and slow trains. But I think it's not one for the London Underground.
And finally, Ross, we've had some strikes news to kick off the post-Easter back to work session. What are you reporting today, Tuesday?
So we have potential strike misery coming not just on the trains but also on the London Underground. There is a London Underground strike planned for next Monday, the 8th of April. That would involve ASLEF's members, who are the tube drivers. However, the good news here is that TfL and ASLEF are due at ACAS, the conciliation service, tomorrow, and the hope would be that progress can be made and that strike can be called off. You know, there's also a second strike by tube drivers, not just on the Monday but also on Saturday the 4th of May, which would affect the day of the mayoral election results being declared. So if that goes ahead, it could be entirely possible that many of Sadiq Khan's supporters and friends, or Susan Hall's, would be unable to get to City Hall for their victory speech, depending on who Londoners choose as their next mayor.
There's more news and features in the Evening Standard newspaper and online at standard.co.uk. Thanks for listening. We're back tomorrow at 4 p.m.